repair, but also talk about some of the unique challenges that exist in these industries. So it's my pleasure to introduce the panelists, and then we'll give each of them a few minutes to kind of share some of their insights, and then we'll spend the bulk of our time this morning talking about having questions and answers. So as Nick mentioned, please enter your questions anytime throughout the session, and we'll get to the questions as they come in and try to have as much dialogue as we go through the material. So before I actually get into the intros, I wanted to share just a little bit of information about CSCMP and the Sustainable Supply Chain Committee. So next slide, please. So let me go into the intros here first of all. Sorry about that. So first we have representing from Carlisle Industries, Natechenenko, and Nate will share some insights on right to repair, some of the implications to multiple industries, as well as some of the regulations that are happening within the European Union. Michelle from Intel is the Senior Director of Sustainability Strategy within our desktop computer division and CPU and desktop computer division. She'll share some of her experiences and insights and what Intel is working through right now to advance some of our sustainability strategies, and specifically what we're trying to do around repairability in partnership with some of our customers. And then Theo, who is a circular economy analyst from BBB Industries, will share how his industry is participating in the circular economy and repairability through repaired and reused auto parts, as well as some of the challenges in his industry and working with clients and within the company in bringing some of these circularity and repairability concepts into reality. So as we go through, I'll give each of them a little bit more time to discuss their insights and what's going on. But now I will share a couple things around CSCMP. So this webinar is being brought to you by the Sustainable Supply Chain Committee. And this is a committee that was launched about 3 years ago under the CSCMP, Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals organization, to really help advance the education and awareness around sustainability, specifically within the supply chain, and develop a closer relationship between CSCMP, academics, practitioners across the supply chain in the areas of sustainability. Our committee is comprised of volunteers from multiple industries. We have a number of different manufacturers on the committee. We have service providers. We have a number of representatives from academia. So we're really trying to create this diverse view and looking to sponsor educational series such as this, as well as other activities that I'll share here in a moment. But please visit our website, cscmp.org. You can see more information about the committee and about some of the great things that CSCMP is doing. So there's a couple of things that our committee is sponsoring, and the first one is the third year of our Sustainable Supply Chain Survey. And this is something that we do in conjunction with MIT, Council of Transportation and Logistics. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is the third year that we've run this report, and we tap into about over 3,000 respondents globally that share their perspective on a number of different issues across the supply chain and sustainability. And it's due to come out later this summer, so keep an eye out for some of the publications for that. And there will be a track to review the output from this survey at the CSCMP Edge conference coming up later this summer. So really an interesting and diverse set of information that's shared in that survey, and we're really looking forward to this year's version. It's bigger and better than ever. And then the other thing that our committee sponsors is a Supply Chain Sustainability Award. And this is designed to recognize either individuals or small teams within the industry that are showing innovation and leadership in the area of sustainability and supply chain. So please, if you know of anyone that you feel is deserving of this, or if you have recommendations yourself within your organization, please visit our website, and we'd love to have you apply. So without further ado, let's get into the first introduction for the next slide, and we'll get into um, Nate to share a little bit about Carlisle and his view on repairability and some of the regulations out there. So Nate, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Greg. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to have this opportunity. I'm Natechenenko. I'm a managing director with Carlisle and Company. We are a strategy consulting firm primarily focused on the motor vehicle aftermarket. So motor vehicle includes the automotive space like Honda, General Motors, Toyota, but also companies like John Deere, Case New Holland, Kubota, Bobcat, all of the heavy equipment manufacturers as well. And we do a lot of work in what we call after sales, which is parts and service for them. And of course, repairability is, in addition to being an engineering decision about like design and engineering and manufacturing, it is also an issue on parts and service, where in order for something to be repairable, you have to have parts to do it and you have to have the information necessary to do it. So we really break this down into two different pieces. There's the physical good, which we'll call repair parts, and then there's service information. And at Carlisle, I'm not an attorney. I pretend to be an attorney, but I'm not actually an attorney. And I handle a lot of our research into regulatory issues as a result of that. So we've done work in this area for multiple different clients, but on the repair parts side, parts retention regulations are increasing globally. At least in the US currently, there are very few cases where companies who make a product that has physical parts, like a car or a computer, that just has fewer parts that are more expensive and more complicated, then there are very few regulations where those parts are required to be provided to customers for a given period of time. The manufacturer often makes those parts available because they make money on it and they want to provide a good service, but there's no regulation requiring it to happen. That is going to change. We're going to talk about here parts retention regulations in a few key countries and more generally the EcoDesign directive in the EU. Then on the right side of the page, on the service information piece, just having a part to fix a product, either a car, computer, whatever else it may be, is often not everything that you need. So there are a lot of sort of old timers who can change a car's oil out there without needing to look anything up. But even doing something simple like an oil change on a relatively new car can be a little bit more complicated than people realize. And they have to go look up something like a shop manual or a service guide. And that information is available. It is also not necessarily readily available, although a lot more available than the parts in some cases. But this regulation is increasing as well. So we'll give a quick overview of right to repair and how consumers feel about right to repair. And again, my focus is primarily from the automotive industry, but we can see these regulations getting stronger as time goes on. So if you click to the next slide here, we'll talk about the repair parts piece, talking about this concept of parts retention. Let's go one more page. And the parts retention laws are different depending on the country that you do business in. And I imagine that a lot of the attendees here are in global businesses who sell your parts or products in multiple different countries. So I want to go through these because the differences are really, really interesting and insightful. In the US and Canada, no rules. Basically no rules. We have no regulations at the federal level in either country. For those who don't know, Canada operates on a fairly similar, but not identical. If there are any Canadians here, I don't want to claim that your government is identical to ours. It's certainly not. But they have a similar sort of federal system where the provinces act like US states do. Some states and provinces have some basic parts retention laws, like in the state of Maine, but the US laws are very lenient and often non-existent. So it's sort of tempting, because this is not something that we deal with in the US market, to say if you're a US-based manufacturer, if you live in the US, you may not be aware of what's going on in other countries. But they get stricter depending on the country that you're in. So the UK has a law that specifies that goods must have a certain standard of durability. That is often misinterpreted to mean that every product that is ever sold, every physical good that's ever sold, has a implied warranty of 5 or 6 years. That is not actually true. That is not a legal requirement, but it is a common misinterpretation. There are dozens of like Daily Mail and Sun articles in the UK that have this misconception. The trouble is that from a legal standpoint, popular misconception can often lead to laws. So since the law says it has a certain standard of durability, and everybody thinks that there's a law that means that there's a 6-year warranty, that's the standard. So it's not a formal law, but it makes things a lot trickier, especially much trickier than it does in the United States. Things are actually a little bit stricter in Russia than they are in either the UK or the US and Canada, which is not sort of stereotypically what we expect to see, but in this case applies. In Russia, there's a soft requirement on parts retention, which means that if there's no service life set for the product, so let's say you sell a computer and you say the service life is 4 years, then you have to keep repair parts available for that computer for 4 years. If you don't set a service life, Russia just assumes that the service life is 10 years. That may be a lot longer than you wish it was. So all you have to do in Russia is say that the service life is like 1 year, and then you just have to have parts available for 1 year. But if you say nothing, you can find yourself in a tricky situation. So that's sort of a preview of my general recommendation. Again, I'm not a lawyer, don't take this as legal advice, but our general recommendation is that you should be aware of and talking to your teams about regulations that cover parts retention. So let's click one more page, please. The strictest regulations on parts retention are what the EU is working on, and it's called EcoDesign. And this is why I think this topic is such a good overlap with the topic of this webinar today, is because you can probably guess from the name, EcoDesign is a European Union law designed to improve the sustainability of everything that's sold in the economy. And they realize that in order to have sustainable products selling into their market, that parts have to be made available for those products so that they can be fixed. You know, I don't want to buy a car, have one piece on it break 5 years later, and then have to scrap the entire car. That is like the opposite of sustainable. And the European Union has been pretty aggressive about setting these rules. The motor vehicle industry in which I work is relatively late, probably a combination of the complexity and product life cycle, which unlike in the electronics industry, a product life cycle in like a heavy equipment product can be 7 to 8 years. And probably a combination of that plus the excellent lobbying power that large international automotive companies have means that the automotive industry is relatively late to this. But if you are on the line and you sell something like a fan or a radiator or an air conditioner, these regulations already apply to you. And they can be quite strict. The minimum is often 7 to 10 years that you have to retain parts. So you sell an air conditioner in 2022, you need to have all the parts to service that air conditioner until 2032, which may not be your current business model. And it's actually from the date of last sale. So if that model sells into 2025, you need to have those parts as late as 2035. Again, this is like very, very overgeneralized. You should do the research for your own company here. You also need to make sure that repair information is available the entire time. I'll talk about this more when we get to my next section, which is right to repair. And then the last bullet point here is really interesting. It's a maximum delivery time for spare parts of 15 working days after receiving the order. So if the manufacturer gets an order for parts on, let's say, June 1st, you need to fulfill that order 15 working days in, which probably puts you somewhere around June 20th. And especially with all of the supply chain issues that everybody's facing right now, that can be pretty tricky to do. So this also implies some big changes necessary to things like inventory management and logistics. So very, very important. This could entail like a complete retool of logistics networks. So let's go one more page, please. So let's talk about right to repair. And I have some details on right to repair on the next page that you can click to. The right to repair covers repair information. And I pulled some of these pages out of a presentation that we gave to motor vehicle companies, because in general, I would say motor vehicle companies probably know less about this topic than companies who are in the electronics world where you're selling direct to consumer. and thus have to be paying a lot more attention to it, as opposed to motor vehicles, which are almost entirely purchased via a dealer. But for anybody on the line who doesn't know, which is probably at least half of you, so if you don't know, certainly don't feel bad. Right to repair is government legislation that allows consumers the ability to repair and modify their own products. Well, you always have the ability to repair and modify your own products. The trouble is that as product complexity gets more complex, you may not have all of the information you need to do that. And in the past, some manufacturers in some industries have limited the ability of the customer to access all of the diagnostic information and tools that so-called authorized repairers have access to. So imagine that this is like somebody decides that Wikipedia is all written in code. And if you don't have the code cracking ability, you can't read it. It's all still free, it's still out there, but it's useless to you if you don't have the ability to understand what's going on. That's what some manufacturers have done from a like repairability strategy. So let's go to the next page and talk about sort of what this means in practice. So right to repair, let's say you buy a new model. What right to repair will mean is that when your machine, and I'm using that term like very generically, we've got an image of a computer, but it could be a car, it could be, you know, a leaf blower, whatever it may be. When right to repair passes, either in a state or at a like US federal level or as part of the European Union EcoDesign, diagnostics on that machine must tell you what the problem is. They can give you a code, but they have to tell you what the problem is. And then you can choose to go through any channel to repair that machine. So you could go through the manufacturer's authorized channel, like you could go to the Apple Genius Bar. You could go to a third-party repairer, so you know, a Apple or phone repair shop on the corner, or you could do it yourself. And let's click to the next page. So that's what right to repair will change. As I said, some manufacturers either force you or make it hard. They either force you into the manufacturer's channel or they make it hard to leave that channel. And I'm not casting judgment on whether that's a good decision or not, but this is undoubtedly related to this concept of repairability. And again, bad repairability means that the supply chain gets less sustainable because there's more waste, more scrap, less reuse. So at the federal and state levels, right to repair, this is all applicable only in the US for anybody on the line from other countries. The Fair Repair Act of 2022 at the federal level was introduced. At the state level, there are 34 different states who have either passed right to repair legislation or are working on legislation. Generally, when 34 states all do something at the same time, that indicates that it is likely to happen. So please go one more page. Customers agree that right to repair should be passed. Let's click again. I think there's an animation on this page. If you survey customers, which we do, we survey anybody who owns a, well, not all the people who own a car. We do a survey of about 2,000 people who own cars in the United States, and 83% of them think that right to repair should pass. Now, there are probably people on this webinar who are highly educated about right to repair and could speak for an hour about all the good reasons that right to repair may harm manufacturers and may be damaging, and that is all true. I can't argue with you on the merits of right to repair, but the fact is, if 83% of people agree on something in US politics, that is like a shocking, stunning plurality of people. I think you could probably poll the US on how many people think that murder should be legal, and you'd get more than 17% of people on the other side saying that. So this is, it is going to happen. So let's click another page, please. In conclusion, I just have a quick wrap-up slide on the next one. And to wrap up, there are, I go back one slide and I'll conclude verbally here. I think these regulations are likely to increase. The repairability laws covering parts retention will move relatively slowly. There will be a lot of variation between jurisdictions. In the US, it'll probably happen first at the state level. In Europe especially, it's something to watch out for right now. The right to repair laws for information availability will move a lot faster and are going to happen more quickly, but probably pose less of a difficult supply chain issue than the parts repairability changes. So if anybody has further questions, you're welcome to type them into the Q&A or hold them until we do all of the Q&A or reach out to me separately. But thank you all for your time, and I will put myself back on mute and turn things over to, I think, Theo's next.
Great, thanks, Nate. That's really interesting. Theo, please take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you, Greg, for having me on today, and thank you for everyone tuning in. It's awesome to see the interest in the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. To Nate's point, the right of repairability is so important to my organization's business model. My name is Theo Lampiris, and I'm a circular economy analyst at BBB Industries. We're headquartered in Daphne, Alabama, and been around for 35 years providing sustainably manufactured parts to the automotive industry. These parts include starters, alternators, steering gears, steering racks, turbochargers, you name it, we will sustainably manufacture it. So as Nate was talking about the right to repair, it is so essential to our business model that we're able to receive these broken or worn parts and take them down to our remanufacturing facilities and give them a second and third life. And this provides a sustainable option for our industry, which I'll talk about further later. BBB Industries has 9 factories across the globe, over 11,000 employees, and over 19 distribution centers. As you can see from this graph from 2008-2002, we've had a significant growth in sustainably manufactured parts over the years, and we continue to grow as the industry continues to grow, and the focus on reusing the materials and reusing the parts that we already have becomes more and more of an effort in our industry. Next slide, please. So when I talk about BBB Industries' global footprint, I'm talking about countries in North America and Europe. And we've expanded over to Europe quite significantly in the past 2 years. I would like to speak a little bit about the supply chain here at BBB Industries. So we source quite a bit of our raw materials from parts that are already in the supply chain. Once you go to your dealership, if your starter or alternator is broken, they'll take that broken part and they'll send it to us. We'll take that spent core and we'll fix it. What we'll do is we'll implement that 10% that's broken as new, take that 90% that's not broken, reuse it, and send it right back to the customer for a second or third life use. Now, this supply chain is quite different than the linear business model of take, make, and waste, which we see quite commonly with new products. Our supply chain has a heavy emphasis on using the materials that's already out there and hedging these materials so that we don't experience the volatility in materials that have to be sourced new. This volatility comes from an increase in cost over a specific period of time and is subject to geopolitical events across the world. So what we provide to our customers is not only a fantastic product that they can use, but an assurance that these materials are going to be available when they need them. And we see quite often that there are supply chain issues across the globe, and the part that would take a year as new to get to the customer only takes 2 to 3 weeks in our business case. And that's a significant advantage that we can provide the customer. Next slide, please. So to further go into this emphasis on material reuse, on the left, we see a new business model. All the materials are sourced as new. They're mined, refined, processed, and distributed to their customers where they're manufactured. Unfortunately, a lot of these products go right into the waste stream after they're used. And this is something that we're trying to capitalize on as a sustainable manufacturer. To the right, you'll see that only 10 to 30% of our products and materials are sourced new. That means that we take up to 90% of our finished good and we save it from going into the waste stream. In 2021 alone, we saved over 150 million pounds of waste from entering the waste stream. And that's something that we're very proud of here at BBB Industries. So as you can see from Nate's point, right to repair is so critical to auto remanufacturers. and is at the core of what we need to do business. On the second half of that, sustainability is a topic that's getting so much more attention these days, and we thrive in that business topic. We're able to give these parts second and third life and involve the customer in an environmental friendly option that they wouldn't have had if they could only buy new. Next slide, please. So just as an example, here is a sustainably manufactured turbocharger versus a new turbocharger. As you can see, the difference in aluminum need from a new one to a sustainably manufactured one. And this is very exciting because not only are you mitigating risk in your supply chain, but you're mitigating the need for new aluminum and new steel to be sourced from our earth. And projections for the next 10 to 20 years show the decreased availability in materials such as aluminum or copper or lithium. These materials, we're going to run out of them eventually. And it's unfortunate that they're not as renewable, or we can't just make them at our own need. So what we need to do is focus on taking advantage of the materials that we already have in the supply chain and making new products from those materials. As you can see on the bottom left, I'd like to re-discuss how a self-reliance on material supply leads to supply chain durability. China, India, Russia, and Canada tend to be the largest producers of aluminum worldwide. So when you're sourcing for North America, you're a prisoner to the geopolitical events and the price of those countries. And having less of a reliance of your supply chain on those countries and sourcing from only North America or wherever you do business creates an incredible advantage to your supply chain and to your customer when they're buying into your product. So when speaking about sustainability to the customer, as common of a topic as this has been over the past couple of years, we find that there is a barrier of education when it comes to sustainability. We have multiple customers who ask us, what is sustainability? How can we implement this into our business model? How can we become a sustainable company? And quite often, we go to our customers and provide them educational materials about how these products can provide them advantage to their customers and how we can get our customers' customers to be involved in this messaging. And it's quite exciting. We identified the benefit of sustainable manufacturing, the impacts that this can have on their organization, and the pride that their workers can have in their organization, and how they can facilitate a global impact by becoming involved in this supply chain. We also take them to our corporate sustainability report, which I would recommend or invite all people here on this webinar today to look at. You can find it on our website. You can also find up to the second analytics about how much materials we've saved, to include plastics, cast iron, steel, up to the second over the whole year. And it's a very exciting time in the circular economy, especially in the automotive remanufacturing industry. Definitely an opportunity for an increase in sustainability efforts. But once again, thank you, Greg, for having me on. And I'm looking forward to what Michelle has to say next.
Awesome. Thank you, Theo. Really, really interesting how you've kind of taken control of some of your supply and also doing it in a sustainable way. Just a reminder to folks as well, please, if you have any questions, please log them into the questions chat there, and we will we'll get to them as we get through this material. So lastly, let's shift gears a little bit, no pun intended there, Theo, to talk a little bit about the, practice that one. Some of these same concepts and how they apply in the high-tech PC industry. So Michelle, take it away, please.
Thank you so much. Just at a high level, I thought it would be useful to talk about what we're doing as a company around circularity, but then we'll dial it into the PC, which is the area that I focus on. and a little bit about why and how PC industry players are looking at and embracing sustainable practices. And I love, Theo, how you mentioned about the pride that employees have when they're part of a company that's really looking at this. And that's been a big factor that I've seen also in our own company and in our partner companies, is more and more people want to be part of a company that is role modeling sustainable practices. And we realize we can make it happen just through our own action and inspire that. So so glad you mentioned that. And then we'll talk a bit, like I said, dial into the PC. So let's move forward and let's get into it. So when we think about sustainability at Intel, we've framed it as far as corporate social responsibility in a program called RISE. So we always think about what are we doing and how is the technology used responsibly. So looking at how technology can help improve health and safety. We look at inclusion and how we're engaging across the industry and in our own company to be inclusive as far as our employees and as far as the companies that we partner with. And then the area where I really spend a lot of my time, of course, is around sustainability. And we have a set of goals. What I love is the picture on the left showing how we've set goals at our company level, which is the smallest part in the center, which governs our own operations. But we really aim to partner in the industry through examples like this, where we are right here today, and partnering with like-minded people in the industry to see how we can do something even bigger than what we can do on our own. And so that's our overall strategy. It's responsible, inclusive, sustainable, and then all of it is through enabling and partnering across the industry so we can do more than anyone can do ourselves. So let's move forward. And we'll look a little bit at some of the recent accomplishments around it, and I'll really just focus on the sustainability area. So since we set our 2030 goals a couple of years ago, we've been doing annual updates. And in fact, we just published our latest update a couple of weeks ago, reporting on what we did this last year. And we're really proud. On the right side, you can see we've achieved 80% renewable electricity. This is globally. This is for our production of all the components in our operations. So this is including 100% renewable energy in US and Europe, Israel, and Malaysia since 2021. And then we've had a big focus that I'm really proud of around our management of water. And so we have 99% globally, the fresh water that we're using is treated and returned to communities or the environment or restored through watershed projects. And I've been really inspired to see some of these watershed projects and looking forward to more of those happening. Now, dialing that down into circularity, I just put at the bottom, I just called out around circularity. So we have a goal to get to zero waste to landfill by 2030, and we were at about 5% this year. And that's even knowing that we have some really big commitments to new construction and increasing our fab manufacturing capability. And then we also have a goal to apply 60% of circularity strategies applied to 60% of our manufacturing waste in partnership across the industry. So that's a look at the corporate level, but let's dial it into the PC. So here we have some of the challenges of PC circularity. And let me just take a moment to share how our team is engaged in that. You're probably familiar with Intel as a manufacturer of components for the PC, such as the processor, there's chipsets, also for servers, et cetera. You may not be aware that in each of our business units, such as the client group that I'm in, we develop reference systems. So we develop reference boards, reference computer systems, which we share and look at together with system manufacturers. And the idea is that if we can prove things out in these reference systems, then when we partner with system manufacturers, it can help speed up and give them more confidence in their innovation. So my team directly, we do develop desktop PCs. And so we've been practicing these things and learning and going through that journey ourselves on how to be more sustainable and more circular in our PC system design. So some of the things that I've experienced and then learned through just learning more about the industry, some of the challenges, first off, the big challenge is that we have a low end user engagement in trade-in. You just look at it, not very many people even know how to trade in an old PC. So the trade-in rate is something around 15% globally, which we want to change that. We'd like to have PCs have a second life and a third life, right? Like how Theo was sharing to us. And then when you do some research and you look at why do people not trade in their PCs, part of it is this awareness I mentioned, but amazingly part of it is that people can develop more of an emotional connection with their PC, right? They've used their PC for so long, and maybe they bought it at an important time in their life, like college, or maybe it was a gift from somebody important. So even at the end of life of that device for them, they may not be very inclined to trade it in or give it away or sell it because it has that connection. So that was one of the surprising learnings I had. There's also a perception about how much should it be worth if you sell it, and are you getting the value that you expect for it? And then also just being confident, right? Do people know that their data has been removed and it's safe to sell or trade in that PC? And also be confident that they're not going to lose any data that they need. So that behavior area is something that I hope we can all as an industry work on, because that's so important to getting this good business model where trade-in is happening and then people can buy refurbished PCs. So that's in the middle area is, are people aware that they can buy PCs? Many people don't even realize you could go up on Amazon, you can go on Best Buy, you can go to most of the major OEMs and buy a refurbished PC. And a lot of people just don't realize, or they don't know how to assess it to make sure they can trust it and feel comfortable buying and using that device. And then lastly, if you look at some of the design challenges for refurbishers, the refurbisher, the company doing this, needs to be able to, they need to make money. It's a business for them. So they need to be able to disassemble the PC quickly, preferably no glue in that design, because you want to be able to put it back together without, and take it apart without damaging it. And then they need to be able to do a good job assessing the condition of the PC so they know, could it be reused and have a second life, or does this thing need to be recycled at this point? Or what can they repair in order to make it usable? So the nice thing I've seen is that addressing these kinds of issues also resonates really closely with our modern workforce. Many of us want to be proud of our company. We want to address these challenges. And so I'm seeing good motion across the industry on addressing them. So let's go forward from there. In terms of the PC, and I apologize that the font's a bit hard to read, but when we get into the design of the PC itself and what can we do to make it more repairable, some of the components of this are really nicely laid out in eco labels. And so I just have to say that I'm very thankful to the eco labels that have been developed, as well as the advancement in them, because it simplifies our life so much as a team that is doing the design. So this chart here I took out of the EPEAT eco label, which is one of the most popular eco labels for PC design. And you can see it has these different categories around the material selection, how much of that is recycled content, and there's other factors on material selection. There's components in here as far as what information is available at end of life, so that you know how to recycle or reuse those components. There's quite a bit of really useful information in the EPEAT eco label around repairability and serviceability. It's great. It's guidance that helps the design team understand what they should be looking at. For example, how many components is reasonable that you should be able to replace in a PC? What kind of information do you need for a battery? So the battery could be easily replaced. And then one of the things I think is so straightforward and obvious is about the tools you need just to disassemble the PC. And so there's guidance and encouragement to use standard tools. So if you have standard tools, then it's much more likely someone's going to actually do the repair and the device gets its full life. So also in EPEAT, there's guidance around product take back, just about the business model of having a service for it and then having a service specifically for that battery, since battery is one of the most likely things that would need to be replaced on a PC. And then lastly, there's guidance on packaging. A couple of different ways to think about the packaging. One would be around what are the materials used in the packaging, and for example, are they post-consumer recycled content? Are they separable? You don't want to be attaching plastic to cardboard, for example, because then it's very hard to recycle. Is it all marked? And then one thing I found really interesting is, given that an IT department, for example, may often buy hundreds or maybe thousands of PCs at one time, maybe they don't all need separate boxes. Maybe you could have bulk packaging. That's a lot more efficient as far as the packaging goes. And so that's another thing to think about that comes up in an eco label like the EPEAT eco label. So if we go forward to the next slide, I thought I would share, if you think the EPEAT was fairly broad, and I didn't even include everything in EPEAT. But when you drill down into repairability, there are some more specialized metrics that help us on repairability. One of the commonly used is iFixit. And so many PCs, phones, tablets, other devices get scored on iFixit, and you can have a score up to 10. And so some of the things that iFixit is looking for, ease of disassembly, modularity of the components. So for example, if you need to repair the Wi-Fi, then you should be able to repair the Wi-Fi and not have to repair a whole motherboard, right? So that modularity, the use of standard tools. There's some great guidance from iFixit about making sure the things you're going to need to access often are accessible and they're not buried inside the system and, having to take apart too many things. And then really good labeling. And then many may be familiar that there's a French Repairability Index that went into place this year. And this one I find interesting because this is where now consumers, when they're at a point of purchase of a PC, they're seeing data about repairability. And so this action, having this French Repairability Index, goes really a long way to increasing the consumer awareness about repairability. Otherwise, many consumers don't even know where to look to assess a PC for that, and they don't really know how to make those choices. So I'm really happy to see that moving forward. And I think, Nate, you're nodding. I see you nodding your head. I think we expect similar indices to be spreading in Europe, and then I hope broader than that too. So let's see, with that, I think that was the main factors we think about. I'd love to talk more about them later as we get into the Q&A. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know we're going to go over to Greg. There you go.
Yep.
Thanks, Greg.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks. That was really interesting. And again, it's really cool to see again, some of the similarities and some of the unique challenges between the two industries. So I guess we'll first go to any questions, Leah, anything coming across you want to share before we move forward?
Yeah, before we dive into some other questions, I have one from another committee member, Alan Van Boven said, how will parts retention regulations mesh with the emergent 3D printing of parts? For example, Caterpillar has a strong focus on this.
Excellent question. I'll take that one. Caterpillar is amazing at 3D printing, probably better than almost any of the other motor vehicle companies that we work with. The parts retention rules, again, the problem with trying to summarize multiple different countries' regulations in like 3 slides is that I've had to be overly vague. The parts retention rules, especially like the French rules that Michelle also referenced, they cover that the parts have to be available. It doesn't matter where they are. It doesn't matter if you make them on the spot or if they existed already, if they're manufactured in traditional means or if they're 3D printed. You just have to have a part that will fix the problem that the customer's having. We did some looking into this for a Canadian company who was concerned that if a part gets superseded, and I realize this is like quite a tactical answer, but sometimes part A gets upgraded and is now part B and it serves the same function, that's fine too. Again, this is not legal advice, but that from our research in the markets that they cared about was fine. So 3D printing is like, can be, if done well, incredibly sustainable, far more sustainable than doing like traditional subtractive manufacturing. It also saves a lot of transportation, and it does not cause any problems from my perspective with any of the retention regulations that I went through.
Great. Thank you, Nate. So I have just a general question to the panel. If you could share just from your industry, your company's perspective, what are you seeing as some of the bigger macro drivers to invest in sustainability and repairability within your entity? I think Theo, yours was, I think, definitely saw the profit aspects of it coming out in your example, but maybe you could start us off and just explain a little bit from your company's perspective, where are you seeing as some of those other drivers?
Sure, yes. One of the major drivers that we see to sustainability is a gateway of capital. A lot of the times investors hold the reins when it comes to driving specific industries, and those reins translate over to the customer. So when speaking to the customer, we've had quite a few pressures to identify how we are a sustainable company through questionnaires or surveys, and kind of peel back the veil of where we get our products, where we source our materials, provide that information to our customers so that they can provide that information to their investors. So I hold fast that capital is the main driver, and potentially I believe it's the only driver that will create an impact that will have some effect for a long time. Sustainability is a great idea, and it's an awesome action to take place, but it only becomes feasible when you fulfill the need of the people holding the capital. So kind of to answer your question, Greg, I only see capital being the driver. And fortunately, our industry in the automotive industry, I'm not sure about technology, holds quite a bit of care to sustainability and the investment into sustainability, which is very good news for the future.
Great, thank you. Michelle, what's your perspective on that?
I see that same trend and driver in making things happen, because the companies in the tech industry and even outside the tech industry clearly are seeing a stock price correlation with how effective they are on corporate social responsibility, including sustainability. There's some pretty amazing charts that show that correlation. And so as a company says, hey, in order to be maximizing our financial situation, we need to be taking goals around sustainability, then they start to look at, they'll take a goal and then try to figure out how to go after it, right? And one of those components that affects us in high tech is they say, well, we have an IT department and we buy PCs for all of our employees and all of this operations. How do we make sure that's part of our sustainability plan? And so it's directly going from that investment and the financial health of a company to specific plans that then drive that business in the PC industry. So I think very similar to how Theo is seeing it, is businesses making it take off. And then for execution, later we can talk maybe about how then what happens inside the company and how are the demographics of our employees changing. But I think that that investment situation is what's kicking this off.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, let me give a specific case study, which is Cummins. And for anyone unfamiliar, Cummins is one of the largest manufacturers globally of engines, like internal combustion engines, and specifically diesel engines. And if it is 2022 and your business is centered around making diesel engines, but all of your executives and your shareholders are walking around saying, wait, all the new cars are electric, what are you going to do? You're in a dying industry. They have put an enormous focus on sustainability, both in new product development, which I will skip entirely, but also sustainability of their existing products. They've got like a team of sustainability people. They're way further along than most other companies in the motor vehicle industry. And this is specifically because people are asking hard questions, like the capital, to Theo's point, are asking hard questions. Why are you doing this? How are you going to stick around into the future? And they're really working to reposition themselves as a sustainable provider of power. And it is really working for them.
That's very interesting. I think if I were to have asked this question 3-5 years ago, it would have probably been, it's about the environment and that was it. But now you do see that people, profit, planet angle coming in as far as what's driving the investment. And it's pretty interesting to see that's happening across all of the industries. So I know we've talked a little bit about the products, both in Michelle and then Theo in your presentation, but if you could expand a little bit about how you're engaging or influencing the original design of the product to make it more repairable. If you could share maybe any insights or partnerships and how you're kind of trying to get involved up front and influencing so that it can be more repairable at the end of its life or towards the end of its life.
Is that to me, Greg? Or
yeah, we could start with you, Michelle. I'd like to get
Sure.
your perspective, and then Theo maybe from Theo or Nate from the automotive side.
Yeah, I think from the PC point of view, you'll see most of the major system manufacturers are taking goals in order to reduce their carbon footprint and be more sustainable, and they're seeing more of their customers demanding it. So we're looking in terms of the design. The straightforward thing is, how do you maximize the score of the commonly used eco labels? And so, for example, on the EP, we were talking about how many components can be repaired, how easy it is it to disassemble your PC, and can you disassemble it really fast? And I think we need to be looking at labeling as well, because I know I had like to Nate's point on like case studies, I had a colleague of mine reach out to me the other day and said, hey, why is it that on PCs that we can't seem to repair the battery anymore? And we can't remove it from the PC, because he had just looked at the chassis of his PC and didn't see one of those little pop out slots anymore. And I looked it up and realized, you know what, it's actually just a few screws now that you use, and they're like Phillips screws that everybody's got, and you certainly can replace that battery. And there's a video online that shows exactly how to do it. It's just that the employee didn't realize it because they just saw that screw together and just thought that they couldn't get in there. So one of the big things I think for us in partnership with the system manufacturers is not only making that easy, making it easy to disassemble a PC and reach the components, but also making it clear to the users that they can do that and that they can actually do the repair.
Cool. Yes, Theo or Nate, any perspective on the auto side?
Sure. It's very interesting to see that insight, Michelle, from the technology side. Unfortunately, as an automotive remanufacturer, we don't design products. We take them back and we fix them and send them right back out to the customer. So we're kind of a prisoner of the material design of the finished goods from the original manufacturers. What we can take a focus on is what I call closing the loop. And at the current moment, say, for example, we can remanufacture or reutilize 91% of an alternator or starter and use that 91% for a second and third life. Well, in closing the loop, our point of view is to how do we take this design and make that 91% 95%? So we mitigate that much waste entering the waste stream. How do we take that 95% and take it to 96% reuse and close the loop? So we're continuously auditing our system to see how we can better utilize materials. But unfortunately, we are a prisoner to the design of the original equipment manufacturers. What do you think about that, Nate?
So being a parts and service person, I also have very minimal insight into what goes on in the design side. So I don't think I have a good answer. I don't know enough about design to speak confidently on this topic.
Okay. Leah, do we have any other questions from online?
Yeah, so one for Michelle. There was a question about maybe for remanufactured technology, are there any initiatives or specific projects to work with, companies or schools or something to use those remanufactured laptops? Have you thought about that at all?
I know that most of the major manufacturers have take-back programs, and then they remanufacture and resell. And many of them do have programs with schools and universities. Thinking outside the box for that, one thing that I've seen in my local area, so I'm based in Portland in Oregon, and so we have a program that's called Free Geek. And so you can donate PCs to Free Geek, they'll do repairs to it, and then they will get those in the hands either of schools or other people that are in need. And so I think that that's been very successful. It's been really useful, I think, to learn what things can help them be successful. And I'd like to see those things spreading across the nation and into other countries as well.
Great, thanks. One other question we had from the attendees was that there are so many sustainability metrics that they've noticed that some companies are purporting to be sustainable and many consumers disagree. How are manufacturers dealing with this? Who wants to take a stab at that?
I can answer that. Unfortunately, being that sustainability and actionable sustainability is such a new topic, you're right. We're seeing quite a few frameworks and guidelines come out of this is how organizations should report sustainability. You need to answer these questions and report these metrics, and then once you do that, you're a sustainable company. Unfortunately, a lot of these frameworks don't align, so it's really up to the organizations individually to pick and choose which regulation to follow, especially those organizations that don't fall in a country that holds an accountability to sustainability metrics. Fortunately, what we're seeing is the linking up of multiple different frameworks. One, for example, SASB, which is the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, is linking up with the Task Force of Climate Disclosures, TCFD. And when we're seeing this link up, we're seeing an aggregate framework come together. So I hope in the next 2 or 3 years to see one ruling body of sustainability metrics. And once we have this ruling body or this ruling framework, we're able to compare organizations across the board. Once we are able to compare these organizations across the board, we're able to see who's actually taking the investment into sustainability seriously, who's actually looking into the benefits of it, and who's taking the time to become a sustainable company. But as the question asked, at the moment, unfortunately, we are a prisoner of the proliferation of regulatory framework, but it is coming along quite well.
Yeah, Theo, you described it so well, and I think that this proliferation is causing people to freeze and not take any action. And we see it in our business. So we work with most motor vehicle manufacturers, and we do a lot of industry benchmarking. So we collect data about all kinds of supply chain metrics that are important, like inventory and quality and productivity and all of those things. And we want to collect sustainability metrics. And often what happens is we say, well, what can you collect? And one company will say, well, we have this, and another company says, we have this other thing. And one company says, we use these standards and we're on these standards and we could give you all this data. And then we run into like, well, the biggest impact on sustainability is actually the transportation networks, like actually shipping parts around is a bigger deal. And then we end up doing nothing. So this year we basically had to force all of our clients and say, hey, save all of your utility bills from all of your warehouses and tell us how many kilowatt hours of electricity you used. And I know that it's generated differently. And I know that this doesn't include diesel fuel. And I know that it doesn't include like all the natural gas. Like, but we have to start somewhere. So like from a macro level, Theo, you're absolutely right. I just hope that nobody is letting that stop them from doing things on the micro level as well. I think that it is stopping a lot of people. And I just think that there's still a lot of tracking and simple things that you can do, because I'd rather understand how much power they're using in a warehouse than not have that data at all. And then it'll grow from there as people get more accustomed to it and start to care more.
Yeah, great input.
Thanks. I think we have one more question, Greg, if that's okay.
Sure.
Michelle, kind of following up to your comment about Free Geek, the end consumer market for non-auto seems like a difficult piece of the puzzle. Have you seen examples of customer engagement for the take back or reverse flow? For example, most of us have a drawer of old smartphones. What are some examples of ways to get these products back into the supply chain?
It's such a challenge. My big observation in the PC industry is maybe it's somewhere around 50% of PCs are in commercial and maybe around 50% in consumer. And the ones that are in commercial, mainly they're bought by IT departments. Those IT departments, they know what to do with old PCs. It's their business and they do it every day. And so I'm inspired by that. I think that is where we're going to get the most of this happening, is through the IT departments. It could be IT outsourcers, the businesses that manage their PCs, but they have to do it every day and they want to make it work and make money with the resale. So that inspires me. The consumer side is a lot more complicated, and there's just those points I brought up and a lot of reasons why consumers don't trade in their PC, and a lot of it is lack of awareness or concern. So there's some things I think we can do on technologies, but a lot of it is about awareness. And I think the more we label PCs and the more we see things like Best Buy, where they are selling certified refurbished PCs, that can help inspire consumers to get more awareness and then start having more demand for this. I'd be glad to talk more for the question, whoever asked the question. It's a big passion point.
Yeah, that's a great question. Wish we had more time to go into that a little bit more detail, but I know we're at the top of the hour, and I wanted to respect everybody's time. And thank you again so much, Theo, Nate, Michelle, for your time and sharing your insights, and appreciate the questions from everybody online. And thank you for a really engaging discussion, and hope everybody has a great rest of their day and the weekend. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.